Hey, what's happening, everybody? This Big Steve.
Hey, good morning. Yeah, this is Steve. Normally, y'all see me do a Roadie Rules, type upload. But I think the whole format on this is about to change because we're living in a time where information really needs to be disseminated amongst our people, cultural circle. Recently, we had a men's meeting in the Hardeman's family. It's part of the Hardeman family where all the men and the young men and the elders got together, and we discussed some topics that were pressing, to say the least. And one of the topics that we talked about was law enforcement, which is, as anybody that knows me personally knows, that I have a different take on law enforcement than the average brother. Earlier today, I uploaded a couple of videos, good cop, bad cop, good cop. And I want my officers to understand one thing, and that is you don't have to be afraid of retaliation from your other officers. One of the things that was mentioned at the men's meeting was that there may be 1,000 officers on the force, and 999 of them will be the officers who we want serving and protecting us. But it's that one officer who has no business actually being in law enforcement, let alone with a gun and the authority to use it, that creates the problem for the other 999. I live in Dallas, and as a whole, we have a pretty good law enforcement agency. We've had our few issues, few glitches here and there, but when you're dealing with an organization that big, you're going to have that. But for the most part, we have very, very professional officers. The problem comes in is when we, as citizens of Dallas, interact with the smaller towns like DeSoto, Duncanville, Louisville, and the surrounding areas of Dallas. When you get outside of the city limits of Dallas or Dallas proper, when you start interacting with these law enforcement officers, Carrollton, Farmers Branch, Irvin, so on, who have a different ideology about the practical application of law enforcement. So this is where we come to have this conversation with our young men, with our young women, with the men of my generation and the generation that preceded me, about how to recognize and how to deal with interactions with law enforcement. Just recently, there was an issue, and I ended up getting my truck DOT'd. I'm a truck driver. And everybody know I'm a truck driver. And I ended up interacting with 5 separate officers at one time. Well, I didn't end up with bullet holes in me, and overall, it was a relatively pleasant experience. Now, I don't know how many brothers can say that dealing with law enforcement ended pleasantly, but the truth is the truth. Out of that 1,000 officers, I ended up with 5 that were good officers. They did their jobs. As long as you're doing your job, we don't have a problem. It's when you step outside of doing your job is where you create a situation of conflict. Yesterday had a interaction with law enforcement. Scale house was open. Dealt with 2 officers, state level. Wasn't a bad experience. Wasn't a pleasant experience, but wasn't a bad experience. They have a job to do. And as long as they're doing their job, there shouldn't be a problem. One of the main problems that I see in Dallas is the introduction of outside personnel into our law enforcement apparatus here in Dallas. When you start hiring officers that live in these little bitty towns like Gun Barrel City, Malachi, where these look, I hate to put too fine a point on it, these little hillbilly towns that really don't like black folks, or have an ideology that, you know, unless you a good nigga, you should be accosted at every opportunity. I'm not telling you what I heard, I'm telling you what I know. I've been to these little towns and gone into a store, and next thing you know, they pulling up, walking around in the store trying to see what I'm doing. Dude, I'm buying something. I'm spending money. That's what I'm doing. I'm contributing to your economy. And because I contribute to your economy, it makes it possible for you to even have a job. But that's neither here nor there. When you introduce this type of ideology into a metropolitan law enforcement agency, you create a situation where there's a disconnect between those types of officers who just so happen to wear our uniforms and the community as a whole. The second part to that, that's create all kinds of issues for what would be a good officer, is that when we hire these guys, they come here, they go to our academy, they learn the skill set necessary to go out here and patrol our streets, our metropolitan area in a manner that is consistent with the traditions of the Dallas Police Department. They have to go home. And when they go home, officers gonna hang with officers. And so they go down to these little towns and they pick up these bad habits and they bring them back, which creates a problem. Now, officers, you know and I know that there are officers that truly shouldn't be officers. And I want you to understand something. When you see that, it is incumbent upon you to do something about it, to say something about it. I know you're preaching to the choir right now. I see you're going, nah, man, it don't work like that. Because if something go down, I might need one of these, might need one of these guys. They might show up, be mad, I catch a bullet, you know, and just ain't nothing gonna be done. Well, I tell you what, we are working on a program to acknowledge the good cops. And this is going to be a combination of other officers nominating you, community personnel, people of the community, of the city, nominating you. And I want you to understand something, that we are here to support you. We are here to say to you, hey, look, we got your back. We see you on the side of the road tussling with somebody. Guess what? We coming to help you. You are not alone. You have eyes and friends all around you. Good officer. Shall I name a couple of them? The Phipps, Abilene Police Department. Trooper Colleen, down in Waxahachie. Trooper Lockridge, down in Carson County. Deputy Chief Aziz, Dallas Police Department. And the list goes on and on and on and on. These are just officers that I know are good men, good solid men, who go out and perform their job to the best of their ability. At some point in time, the good officers are going to have to stand up. Because if at any time you see another officer committing a crime, you're in violation of your oath. And when it hits the news that you're being retaliated against, then we as the citizenry are going to come to your rescue. Just like if you're on the side of the road. Because we know who you are. We know you're a good officer. We know that you're going to do what's necessary to do your job. Now, and I understand that you have a reasonable expectation of going home at night to be with your family. And even though that is a priority, you sometimes stop and look at the situation and make a determination before you take an action. And that's all we ask. It's all the citizenry asks of you. No more, no less. We support you. Now, we know that a lot of this ideology starts at the top. And that's where it's incumbent upon us as the citizens to address this. It is incumbent upon us to pressure our city council members, who in turn pressure the mayor, the deputy mayor, and who in turn pressures the mayor to go to the chief of police and say, hey, look out, you got some problems and you need to solve these problems. And before you solve these problems, we ain't giving you one dime of taxpayers' money. And yeah, you can get on the news and go, well, you know, if you cut out the funding, the police are going to go on strike and crime is going to run rampant. That just lets us know that you the one we need to get rid of. Because you don't want to solve the problem. You just want to get paid. And if you're in that job to get paid, we don't need you as citizens of Dallas. I've said what I had to say. Subscribe, comment, like. Let me know what you think. Because we're going to have to change this. If we don't change this now, it's going to be so far out of control that we are not going to be able to survive this. We don't want to go the way of Ferguson. We don't want to go the way of Long Island. We don't want to go the way of Cleveland. We don't want to go that way. We have a good thing, and we need to fortify this good thing with good practice, good policy, good procedures. So like I said, subscribe, rate, comment. This is Big Steve. Be safe out there, man. We got your back. And we watching you, bad officers. Guess what? We watching you. All this rolling around like you a gangster. You ain't no gangster. You took an oath. And those of us who took oaths, we gonna hold you to it. If you didn't want to be held to it, you shouldn't have took it. If you thought this was going to be something like Wide Earp riding around, running and gunning, guess what? We're going to make sure that you don't even get a chance to do harm to anybody, ever. Because we're going to take away your credentials. We're going to take away your badge. We're going to take away your gun. And have you down there working at Walmart, greeting people. Because that's the closest thing you're going to get to a job. But my good officers, we're going to make sure that you are exalted, that you are commended, that you are recognized, and set forth as an example for new officers to follow, to look up to aspire to be like. We say go get them criminals. Go get them. Do what you got to do. Go get them. We got your back. Once again, rate, subscribe, comment. Big Steve, I'm out.